It's rare that I get comments on my videos, but somebody from Europe with a couple of super beetles asked me if I wouldn't inform him a little bit more about what I'm doing with my little fuse box right here. So that starts with this particular pile of junk right here. This is the leftover wiring from the wires that come in right here. Where does it say it? It says direct burial. There it is. You probably can read that. Anyway, this stuff is used generally to trigger sprinkler systems for multi-zoned apartments, industrial, commercial, whatever type sprinkler systems. So you stick it in the ground and it triggers the little systems to go, alright, we'll take zone A, zone B, zone C, and it all runs back to some central unit somewhere. So it doesn't carry too much power or anything, but it's just designed for signal carrying, and it's pretty tough. It is, however, not for automotive use generally. The core of these wires is solid core. Most automotive wiring uses a multi-core. The multiple filaments have a tendency to flex and not break. These things, if they flex too many cycles, they'll snap. But I have done my best to make sure that the exposed pieces of metal have been minimized and eliminated. In this particular case, I don't have any exposed metal. I've literally taken the plastic and shoved it down inside of these. And in many of the cases, I've actually gone back and then soldered down in there to make sure that everything stays okay. I imagine another question might be, what size fuses do I use? The white and the red right here, which comes down off of this yellow one here. Right now I don't have my brake lights, sorry, not the brake lights, but the reverse lights. I don't have them actually hooked up. But this one will run the reverse lights. The reverse lights are an 8 amp fuse. Since this combines with the power that runs to, where is it? Right here, it fires the coil. So the resistance over the coil by the voltage will tell you how many amps that you need to be. This is a blue coil. It's supposed to have a resistance of about 3 ohms. My coil is getting old, so its resistance is going up. You can check your resistance, of course, with a simple meter. This is a very simple meter. Anyway, it's reporting to me that my coil is out of spec. I might need to replace this. I'm surprised that my motor runs as well as it does, given the resistance of this coil. But anyway, you measure your resistance. It's supposed to be 3 ohms, 12 volts, 3 ohms. That results in an amperage of 4 amps. So you take the 4 amps and the 8 amps, and you would get 12 amps. So I'm running, since I don't actually have a 12 amp fuse, one of these yellow dudes, which is, if I can see it real quick, this is a 20 amper. So that'll certainly cover it. One of the things you need to realize about the positive lead here, this is your positive power back here. If you look at the factory wiring diagram, you're going to see that this wire runs all the way back up to your ignition switch, at which point it goes through the ignition switch and without stopping goes over to one of the planes of your fuse blocks, and then it continues on over to the battery. It does not go through the fuse blocks, it simply runs across the back of it, which means it's in fact not a fused circuit. So one of the things that you get, if this thing does not have a fuse on it, and if some negative thing happens to touch this while the power is on, you end up getting an unrestricted flow of energy through your positive lead, which of course runs up through your ignition switch. And that kind of voltage with no resistance is going to take that wire all the way from here back up through there and whatnot over to your ignition switch and into and through your ignition switch. That unlimited flow is going to make that wire ridiculous crazy hot. It's going to melt the outside. This plastic is going to fry, and once it fries, you continue to pump energy into the system. It's then going to, because these wires touch each other, even in the factory wiring system, the wires touch each other. The wire is then going to melt into adjacent wires. It's going to melt them, and pretty soon you're going to have metal on metal contact, and then You're going to blow a bunch of fuses. You know, these guys are going to blow. I mean, your primary one going back to the battery is just going to burn up this particular wire. I know that for a fact because that car had it happen. The wire that runs from the back up to the the ignition switch, touched ground one time while I was out driving. I was just out bopping along, and all of a sudden, like, what the heck happened? I go back into the engine compartment, pop open the hood, I got some smoke curling out, and it turns out that my license plate light had pulled loose and had shorted across one of the terminals. And at that point I realized, holy crap, this thing really should have a fuse. So I have, when redoing this particular vehicle, I knew I was going to put a fuse on that circuit. I don't wish to blow out my wiring from front to back. But anyway, that tells you what that one is. What else have I got? I've got, these are all gauges. So what do you do with a gauge? On my particular case, gauges generally don't have a fuse at all. So all of mine use these guys right here. This happens to be a 7.5 amp. Most of the stuff that's in this car from the factory is 8 amp. So I figured I would just throw a bunch of 7.5s. So I've got, they're all 7.5, and this guy's a 20 right there. And the trick with the gauges, they usually don't have a fuse, but the exact reverse can happen with these guys. I mean, sure, I can short this guy out by dropping some kind of a ground on it, and it'll blow the wire out. Well, if I happen to make a mistake and throw some positive into these guys, then I have a tendency to drive energy back into the gauge, and I might blow them out. That's less likely, but, you know, I mean, if you're going to do something like stick a fuse box in, you may as well use it. It also makes it a heck of a lot easier to pull stuff in and out of the car. I can just pop, the wire's out. Everything's coordinated, color coordinated, easy to get to. Yep, that's about it, but yeah, I think my coil is going bad. I might try a new one. I don't think it'll have any impact on my mileage, but ooh, wouldn't it be nice if all I have to do is change my coil and I could pick up a mile per gallon or two? Ooh, wow, it's getting dark anyway. One of the reasons why I'm running this block and the little custom piece of wire over here, it's like, well, sure, certainly I've got my factory wiring, right? But there's a problem with that. Now, up in the front of the car, the wiring is not exposed to vibration and heat and chemicals and all kinds of nasty stuff like they get back here in your engine compartment. Now, my wiring was 95% shot. So I just decided that's got to freaking go, so I've completely and totally bypassed it with, my wire. I'm not going to rewire the entire car. That's just kind of pointless. I just needed to get some wires back in here to handle the gauges and deliver some power to the coil and the Pertronics.